This is part 4 of our settings video for ThunderPOS. This is going to be the last part of settings. It's going to run through the internet features, vendor databases, and then some other miscellaneous settings. So we flip over to our VM here. So in the base of internet features, we have our e-commerce sending station. This is only relevant if you're a cloud user for Woocommerce, Shopify, or BigCommerce. It determines which station is actually handling syncing of the product. You can also have the website do it. You can set it to the current station you're on by clicking the Set to This Station button, but only one station should do it, because if multiple stations are hitting it, it can actually cause problems and bog down your site. Email. So this is related to emailed reports and emailed receipts. You can choose whether you're going to use the thunderpos.net address to send out things, or if you're going to send it from your own. If you're going to send it from your own, you just have to fill in the credentials here, and then the from address, and then you can choose whether you're emailing receipts always, never, or prompting. You can put in the website address that your emailed receipts logo will link to. And you can choose whether you are sending a receipt or a receipt with attached PDF. The PDF is of the full professional style invoice. So that would be why you might not want to send that if you're not really wanting to give people that format. You can also, if you're doing the emailed receipt, you can set a logo. The same email address will be used to send both your emailed reports and your emailed receipts. There's not an option to do different ones. If you're using our server, you are limited to 1 gig a month of files by default. That's quite a lot unless you're doing like full item lists daily and you have like tens of thousands of items. So don't do that. There's not really a reason to. If you're hitting that limit, you're probably doing something strange anyway. But if you are hitting that limit regularly, you can talk to us about increasing it, but it would be a little unusual. We have not yet had anybody do so. Including the coupon with receipts, you can include a different coupon on emailed receipts than you do on your normal receipts, so you just have a separate place. You can set it here, and then you can set the logo for your receipts. Amazon, if you happen to have grandfathered credentials, Amazon no longer issues these, to my knowledge, for this particular API, but you can use this to do quick importing using Amazon as a vendor database. You can fill in your credentials here. Unfortunately, they don't really do this anymore for new people, so if you don't already have this, you're probably out of luck, unless Amazon changes their minds on that. Twitter, you can, if you're using the social media stuff, enabled scheduled tweets. You can see the account information for your linked Twitter account here. Leads Online. Leads Online is a reporting process for traded goods, particularly. It's reported to the police, generally speaking, so that people can be caught if they are stealing goods and reselling them. You just check the box that says Leads Online enabled and fill in your credentials there, and it will automatically report trades as they happen. Parable is a bookstore reporting database. If you are going to be reporting to them, you just check the box that says automatically FTP and fill in your credentials from them. The next three you will only see if you're on the cloud, and you'll only see if you are subscribe to that particular feature. Unless you are us, you probably won't have all three, because it would mean you have 3 commerce sites, which would be very strange to choose to do. But they are related to the settings for configuring those. Woocommerce is probably the most common of the 3. So you can check it or uncheck it to make it enabled. You'll fill in your credentials here. And then your description is what you're going to sync to the description on the WooCommerce site. You can substitute fields in the inventory item by surrounding them in quotation marks. And if you do that, there's a list of them in the manual, or you can hit the question mark there to get that, and you will want to have that set up in such a way that it creates the appearance you want. Basic syncing, this used to be called simple syncing, so if you remember that, then that's what you're thinking of. Basically makes it so you sync only new items, and it syncs them as what are called simple items on the WooCommerce side, so they can't have variations. If you actually are using the item options feature and using variations in the software, then items like those will still be variation products, but most products will just be marked as simple products. If you're not doing that, then list new and list used will determine whether or not new items and used items get listed on WooCommerce respectively. Set taxable in WooCommerce based on taxable inventory. Pretty much like it sounds, determines whether the item is set as taxed on the WooCommerce side based on whether it's taxed in ThunderPOS. If any sales tax rates are applied to the item, it will mark it as taxable in WooCommerce. WooCommerce does not have the 3 different rates. Create new items as draft simply makes it so when a product is created by the sync, it is marked as draft, which is effectively not visible to the customer until you get a chance to go in and mark it as finalized. Sync cost to a custom field. This is put in so that you can sync the cost up in some way. WooCommerce does not track cost by default. There are certain add-ons that do. They do it using custom fields. So this makes it so that for whatever add-on you're using, if it's doing it that way, you can sync it up for that add-on to use. Set out of stock items to hidden will make it so that your out of stock items are not visible on your website. You can choose to do this on the WooCommerce side too. They have an option for this, I believe, which you may want to go with over the one within our point of sale. But if you're wanting not all items that are out of stock to be hidden, then this might be the better way to do it. Don't create variations with 0 price and 0 quantity. Makes it so that if you're using variable products and you have some combinations, like say you're using different colors and you don't have any of the black, then it won't list those. It also makes it so if you're not doing basic syncing and you're doing new and used, but some products you don't have in used and some products you'll never have in used, so they have 0 price and they have no stock, obviously, they won't get created, they won't have a new option in that case, or a used option, as the case may be. Don't sync before street date makes it so that the system won't create the item on the WooCommerce side until the street date is reached. If the item already exists, it will do an update, but it won't create it. Deduct open special orders and pre-orders from quantity synced makes it so like if you have 2 in stock but one of them is on order, then it will only sync one as available in stock to WooCommerce. And then for the WooCommerce category, you can actually have multiple categories on the WooCommerce side. You can choose to sync either or both or neither of department and category for that. If you don't sync either, then it will sync it into the uncategorized category that WooCommerce has. Shopify is our next one. A lot of these options are the same as WooCommerce's, in which case I will just gloss over them and mention that they were found there. So credentials, enabled, description, those are all very similar. You can choose to sync only new or only used. If you don't choose either of those, both new and used will sync. Don't sync before street date will make it so that it does not create the item until the street date is reached. Set taxable for Shopify off taxable in inventory. Again, very similar to WooCommerce. It will mark the item as taxed or not based on if you are taxing it in the store. Deduct open special orders and pre-orders from quantity synced. Again, very similar. It will deduct those open orders out of the quantity synced up to Shopify. Don't create variations with 0 stock and 0 quantity. Once again, a repeated setting from the WooCommerce section. So just listen to that part if you are curious on that. The item type, you can select whether that's department or category. The vendor field, you can select between manufacturer description and description 2. And then you can include as into the generic tags listing on Shopify a variety of other fields. And then BigCommerce is our third syncing option for e-commerce. Again, we've got our credentials and description. Again, you can select new or used. Always add item ID to title. So BigCommerce is a little different than the others in that in addition to a unique item ID, you must have a unique title. If there's a conflict, we always add the item ID to the title, so it'll append that. In order to make that not inconsistent, typically people want to always have that on there. But if you don't like the way that looks, then maybe complain at BigCommerce about the requirement that all titles be unique, because it's kind of silly. Hide out of stock items will actually make it so out of stock items are invisible. Unlike Woocommerce, I don't know if there's a way for BigCommerce to do it on their end, so that might be necessary there. Do not update categories makes it so that when you are updating an item, it won't change the category if it's different than what's in the system. When it's creating an item, BigCommerce does require a category, so it will put it in a category when initially making the product. Don't create items with zero price and zero quantity. Don't sync before street date, and deduct open orders are all very similar to the same functions in Shopify and WooCommerce, pretty much identical. Used prefix for titles will actually put a prefix onto the title for the used. You do have to do that because, again, the titles must be unique, but you can customize exactly what that is. The default is used surrounded by asterisks. Custom fields, there is a feature in BigCommerce called custom fields where you can, these will appear on the product listing, so they are visible to like the end customer. So just you'll be able to set the header for it, and then it'll include the field. So it'll be like description is description : and then whatever the description of that item is. Vendor databases, these are settings related to the various vendor databases in the point of sale. These allow you to quickly get product in from those different databases. We're not going to, so quick import makes it so when you scan an item at the register, if you don't have it, it's going to look into your vendor databases in the order that you listed here. There are a number of specific settings for the different vendor databases, mostly whether you want to, if you scan an item that has a category or a department for a product and that you don't have in your system, whether it's going to get that in and add it automatically to your system, or if it's going to just drop it in the default category or department that you have set in items. The one thing that's a little different than that is the use alternative feed for VGPC. That will actually make it so that you are using a alternate price feed that is from a major retailer that is primarily focused on newer titles. You almost certainly don't want to use that if you are primarily retro stuff. The different vendor databases are Brie and VGPC, which are video game focused subscription services. Amazon, which again you have any grandfathered credentials. Ingram Entertainment, AMS, Discogs, and AAC Enhanced. For details on those, we do have videos up about most of these vendor databases. Under the scheduler, we have settings related to the scheduler function. That is where you can do the labor scheduling. It's where you can also do resource-based scheduling. You can maximize how many appointments somebody can have at once. So like if it's a resource that can be shared, then you can make it so multiple appointments can overlap. But if it's a resource that can't be, you might make it so only one can. So if you're using the scheduler, those are some of the settings that determine how that works. Enterprise settings, these are going to be set with help of support, but they are settings that are meant for enterprise users so that they can connect to either their legacy, corp server or their current cloud enterprise server. Rear display settings are related to if you are using the customer displays that we sell, not the two-line ones, but the kind of second monitor style ones that they'll look something like this, actually. Um, you can set up those so that what colors and what the text by default is, and you can actually set up a list of videos and pictures that show as advertisements in between transactions. Um, so advertising, either other local businesses that are paying you or just games or music or whatever that is coming out in the near future. And then setting those advertisements, if you have that on, is just done through this screen. And then finally, we have our customize settings where you can actually, other than the register, which is set up through the register designer, you can set up your colors and fonts for most of the rest of the screen. There are a few screens that will always be the default, including this screen itself, because if these settings applied to this screen, they can make it actually very difficult to change these settings. But they will apply to the majority of the software. So if you want a different color scheme or different fonts or whatever, then you can set that up here. And then you can set up alternative versions of the items screen and the customer screen. This is mostly useful if there are entire categories of things you don't need, such as if you do not ever want to track vendor info or the used and trade-in information, that kind of thing. And that's it. That's the end of the settings tutorial. If you have any questions about this, you can feel free to contact support. Otherwise, that should do it for now. There is also a screenshot-based version of this tutorial available through the Help and then Tutorials menu.